Hello, everyone. I'm Victor Manibo from Wang Law Office. You are watching the AM show, Wang Law Office's question and answer show.
Hi, my name is Ariel. I'm the host, also a senior paralegal at Law Office. Our show going to start every Friday at 11 a.m. EST, 8 a.m. PST.
Here at the AM show, we try to answer all of your important immigration questions. We gather all the questions from viewers through Line or YouTube or email, and we compile them all into one topic per episode. And this week, our episode is all about taxes. How do taxes impact our immigration applications? When do I need to file tax returns? When do I need to submit them if I'm applying for an immigration status? We'll answer all of these questions today.
Yes. So before we start today's topic, Victor, can you introduce a little bit on your own background?
Sure. Again, my name is Victor Manibo. I am a senior attorney here at Wang Law Office. I've been with the firm for over 10 years, and I've been an attorney for over 12 years. I am licensed to practice in New York and New Jersey, although because I practice immigration, and that is federal, I can perform my immigration lawyering anywhere in the country for any client who's located anywhere. I went to Cardozo School of Law here in New York, and I graduated from there in 2010. And for most of my work here in Wang Law Office, I do immigration litigation, meaning I defend people in immigration court and prevent them from being deported by ICE. And I also do immigration applications, meaning I help non-citizens apply for immigration benefits with our immigration agencies. Aside from being a lawyer, I'm also a writer. I write science fiction and fantasy, and my first novel is called The Sleepless, which came out last year.
So back to today's topic. Victor, before we even start on this, what is tax anyway?
So tax is money that is charged by a government to its citizens and non-citizens, the people within its boundaries, its borders, its jurisdiction, to fund public services, to fund the military, to fund entitlements, everything that the government provides to the people within it. They fund that mostly through taxes, and they collect that by people doing different activities. If they create income through a job, then you pay taxes on that. If you have a business, you pay tax on that. If you transfer property or you give property to others as a gift, there are taxes for that. If you sell something, there are taxes for that. So all of these activities can be and are usually taxed by governments, and that's how they raise money. And most people who are listening to the show, they're probably familiar with income tax. And that's when somebody makes any sort of money, makes any sort of living, the government taxes that. And that's relevant for immigration purposes because depending on what kind of application you're seeking with USCIS or our other immigration agencies, income tax returns might be relevant, might be required to be submitted.
What if I don't have status and I am not a citizen yet? Do I still need to pay tax?
Sometimes, yes. For example, there are a lot of people who are in this country who are not citizens. They might be here on a non-immigrant visa, right, to work, and they have to pay taxes on their income. If you don't have status and you have a business, which is legal, you don't need to have lawful immigration status to have a business in this country. You still have to pay taxes on that. So some people think, oh, I don't have status, I don't have to pay taxes, or I'm not a citizen, I don't have to pay taxes. That's not always true.
So if I don't have status and I don't have the social security number in that case, so how do I pay the tax?
You can get an ITIN, an individual taxpayer identification number, which will allow you to pay taxes on your income that you earn while you're in the United States. Our firm has a YouTube show on that has all the information that you need to know about applying for an ITIN, and you can follow it by clicking on the link below.
Yeah, that show is created by Jenny and me, so you guys can watch it.
Yes, you should. If especially if you really want to do this right, you want to pay income, you want to be honest, but you don't have status. Follow the steps there, and you'll learn how to do that.
So if I don't have status, can I even work in the U.S.?
Just remember that if you have no status, you cannot be employed in the United States. It's considered unauthorized employment, and that could make you ineligible for a lot of immigration benefits because that's a ground of inadmissibility, right? Even if you have status, some types of status are not allowed to have employment, such as some student visas, with certain exceptions, right? So you have to know whether you have an NIV or if you don't have status, you have to know that you're not allowed to work, but you're allowed to have a business. You're allowed to derive your income through putting up your own business, starting up your own business, and making an income from there. But if you're not doing business, if you're trying to be hired by somebody else, if you're being paid under the table, that's unauthorized unemployment. That's unauthorized employment, and you shouldn't be doing that.
Okay, thank you for the tips. So back to another immigration question. So if I'm being petitioned by a US citizen or an LPR relative, do I need to pay tax?
If you are being petitioned by a relative for family-based petitions, then you are the beneficiary, right? And we talked about petitions before. The petition just establishes the relationship between the petitioner and the beneficiary. So for this kind of immigration application, you don't need to establish your finances or even your petitioner's finances. What USCIS is looking for is whether these two people are related. However, these family-based petitions are the basis for applying for LPR status, for a green card, right? Either through adjustment of status or consular processing. And when you're doing those, your income, or your petitioner's income rather, is going to be very relevant.
So you mentioned about adjustment of status. So if I'm doing that, do I need to pay tax as a beneficiary?
So adjustment of status, we have to think about this as an application for a green card, and you're applying to be admitted as someone who has LPR status. And one of the grounds of admission, you shouldn't have inadmissibility under the public charge rule. We've talked about that in previous shows, right? The government doesn't want people coming into the United States that will be a burden to the government. So they have the public charge inadmissibility ground. And to overcome that, you have to show that the person petitioning you has enough income to support you. So really, you don't need to pay tax as a beneficiary. You have to show that your petitioner has enough income to support you. And usually the petitioner can show that by paying taxes and providing their income tax returns.
So do I need to submit the tax return with the adjustment of status, the application?
If you're applying for adjustment of status and you have a petitioner, right, who's family-based, like we're talking about in this example, you have to submit what's called an affidavit of support. This is a form that we've discussed in previous episodes, and it is where the petitioner says, yes, I promise to support this immigrant for a certain period of time, and this is my income, here are my assets, and the petitioner will submit supporting documents, including their tax returns. So the quick answer is yes, the tax returns have to be included in the adjustment application because the adjustment application needs to have an affidavit of support by the petitioner. But this is the petitioners, not the beneficiaries, right? Sometimes the petitioner might not have enough income or might not have enough assets to be able to support the beneficiary, because a petitioner has to show that their income and assets is above the federal guidelines for poverty, right? And if they're not, then they can use the beneficiary's income and assets, in which case the beneficiary should provide financial documents, including the beneficiary's tax return, or the petitioner and beneficiary have to get a co-sponsor. This is a different person who has to provide their own tax returns and their own financial records.
So if I'm doing consular processing, do I still need the tax return?
For both adjustment of status and immigrant visa through consular processing, you're submitting the affidavit of support. It's the same form, and that form has space that's asking for income for the past 3 years according to your income tax return. You don't have to submit income information for the past 3 years. It's just there. At a minimum, you should submit the most recent tax return and the most recent income figures. Okay, so not all 3 years are required. Some people are worried about that. One one is enough.
Yes. So all the family-based green card, if you need the green card, you still need the tax return. So we keep talking about tax return. What is tax return anyway? Is those documents that I got from CPA?
Well, yeah, I keep talking about the term tax return, and some people might not be familiar with it. The tax return is something that your tax preparer, or maybe you yourself prepare, you submit it to the government to pay taxes. It can be a few pages, it can be a lot of pages, because sometimes there are supporting documents, supporting computations, and forms that you have to submit together with it. Also, tax returns can be federal or state, because you're paying tax to the federal government and also to the state that you live in. And those are different kinds of taxes, right? In the immigration sphere, we're mostly talking about federal tax returns. In those forms, typically the base federal tax return, income tax return, are only 2 pages, not including all the supporting forms. Now, depending on your application, depending on the case, you might have to submit not just the 2 forms, but everything else that's included, all the supporting documentation. That depends on the case and depends on the strategy. You should consult with your lawyer on, do I need to submit this thick of a document or just the first 2 pages?
So I often heard about W-2. What about W-2? Is that part of tax return?
So the W-2 is a common form that is given to someone who is an employee. If you have an employer, your employer typically pays taxes on your behalf by withholding them from your paycheck. At the end of the year, the employer is going to give you a W-2. It has all the wages and salaries that you got and all the taxes that has been withheld from your paycheck. And that W-2 form is the basis on which you prepare a tax return. So it's a document that you need to prepare a tax return, or that your CPA needs, right? It is not part of the tax return, but the W-2 is supporting documentation, because the numbers in there flow into your tax return, and sometimes it's needed by USCIS or immigration agencies. Sometimes they will ask for W-2. Sometimes you submit a tax return and they want more information. They might ask specifically for a W-2. And sometimes also it might just be beneficial, depending on your strategy, and obviously talk to your lawyer about this, to just submit the W-2 together with the tax return. This is not always the case, but sometimes that might be helpful.
So what happens if I don't submit a tax return with my adjustment of status or the immigration visa application?
Generally, it's not going to be denied. You have to submit an affidavit of support. If you don't submit an affidavit of support, they will issue an RFE. If you submit an affidavit of support and you don't have a tax return, they will submit an RFE. They will give you an RFE and you have to submit the missing tax return. Submit an affidavit of support and a tax return, but the income is not enough. The USCIS will give you an RFE and you have to submit someone, probably a joint sponsor, who has enough income. So, of course, the best way is always to make sure that your application is complete from the very first time you submit it, so that nothing gets delayed. But sometimes, maybe the tax return isn't ready, or maybe somebody forgets, or maybe somebody miscalculates the income. Don't worry, it's not going to be denied automatically. You will be RFE'd, but again, that's going to cause delay. That's time and money wasted.
And good lawyer going to stop on the last point and then tell you if you have enough document, if you can submit it. So they're going to help you on that. So what if I'm filing adjustment of status in the immigration court? Are those requirements the same?
Yes. So sometimes people go through immigration court to pursue adjustment of status. We've talked about this in previous shows. You can pursue adjustment through USCIS or the immigration judge, and you still have to submit affidavits of support. You still have to submit tax returns. Some immigration judges are a little strict. They also want to see all the supporting documentation. They want to see W-2. Sometimes they want to see tax transcripts, and you have to submit those as well.
So what about a tax transcript? Is that different from the tax return because it's 2 different names? Do I need to submit that?
A tax transcript is different from a tax return. The tax transcript is a document from the IRS. That's our federal tax agency. And they issue that, and that document shows the figures from your tax returns, and the fact that the tax return was filed and paid. So it's a little bit more detailed, and it's different from a tax return that way, because the tax return is something that you or your CPA creates or produces. The tax transcript is from the IRS. Now, USCIS applications don't require you to submit the tax transcripts. All that's required is the tax return generally. But sometimes, like I said, an immigration judge might want to see the tax transcript to make sure that the tax was actually paid. Or USCIS might want to see the tax transcript just to make sure that the figures are accurate. Sometimes this happens, and USCIS will RFE for that, or the judge will ask for that. But as a minimum, the tax transcripts are not required. If you have these, it's better to have them ready and handy. You don't have to submit them, but it's good to have them just in case they're asked later on through an RFE.
Yes, and if you have a lawyer with experience, they're going to tell you at first point what tax document you need to prepare. Just like us, we have a checklist for all the kind for all the list.
Yes.
What other kind of application do I need a tax return for?
So aside from family-based petitions that we were talking about in adjustment of status, generally tax returns are needed for applications that require showing of good moral character. These include cancellation of removal and naturalization if applying to be a citizen. Because being a responsible taxpayer, giving what's due to the government, shows that you have good moral character, that you're going to be a good person staying here in this country, you're going to be a good citizen. So you have to show that you're honest with your taxes, that you pay them on time, and your income tax return is proof of that.
So how many years of tax return do I need to submit with my cancellation of removal application?
For cancellation of removal, you have to show good moral character. That's why tax returns are helpful. But also with cancellation of removal, you have to show that you have continuous presence within the United States for at least 10 years, right? So tax returns kind of satisfy both of those requirements. Obviously, if you've been paying taxes in the United States, then you are present in the United States. So if you have 10 years of tax returns, that means you've been here for 10 years. It satisfies presence. But that also shows good moral character, because for the last 10 years, you're responsible, right? You're paying your taxes. You're giving to the government what's due to the government. You're honestly declaring what you made while staying here in the country. So tax returns are very helpful for cancellation of removal applications. If you can show 10 years, that'll be great. If you can show more than that, obviously that is a lot better.
So if I don't have income, I don't have to pay tax. What do I do then?
If you don't have to pay tax, obviously you're not going to have an income tax return, and that's fine. But you have to make sure, especially for cancellation or removal, that you have other continuous presence documents showing that you've been here for 10 years or more.
So if I made a lot of income, is that bad for my application?
Cancellation of removal is about showing hardship to your family. It's about hardship to a U.S. citizen or LPR spouse or children in the event that you're removed. So if you have a lot of income and you are removed, that means that your family will likely suffer financial hardship because they don't have you supporting them financially anymore, right? So the tax returns are going to help in showing hardship. You're making a lot of income. That income is going to disappear once you're removed. So it's not going to be bad for your application. It might be good for your application. And again, the tax returns help for that.
So all the tax returns going to be helpful for the hardship waivers, right?
Right. So another type of application that tax returns can be helpful for are the hardship waivers. We've talked about these before in other shows. We have the fraud waivers, we have the unlawful presence waivers. There are many types of waivers, and generally they require showing hardship to qualifying relatives who are U.S. citizens or LPRs or spouses or parents generally. And one kind of hardship that you have to show is financial hardship. So tax returns can show how your income helps the family or these family members, and how the loss of that income will cause hardship to your family member.
What about citizenship? How much tax return do I need to provide?
This depends on the basis of your citizenship application. If your green card was based on marriage and you're applying for citizenship or naturalization based on that, then you can apply after 3 years of having your green card. And in that case, you have to show that you have good moral character during the last 3 years before you file your citizenship or naturalization application. So you need to provide 3 years tax returns immediately preceding whenever you're filing your naturalization application. For all other bases of naturalization, you can apply for citizenship after having your LPR status for 5 years. So you have to show that you have had good moral character for the past 5 years before you file your application, and that includes your tax returns for the past 5 years.
So for the citizenship, I need to provide my own, not my petitioner's tax return, right?
That's correct, because now it's citizenship. We're not talking about the petitioner anymore. You already have your green card. This is your application. They're not, USCIS is not looking at the petitioner anymore at this point. They're looking at you and your good moral character, whether you have been paying taxes and doing your responsibility as a person who lives in the United States. The petitioner is only relevant for the public charge part, which is, way past when you're doing naturalization, because you already have your green card.
Are there applications where I do not need to provide a tax return?
For asylum, T visa, E visa, VAWA, and SIJ, these applications all have a path to a green card, but do not have public charge inadmissibility, and they have special rules because these sorts of applications are for people in need, for people who are vulnerable. These are special cases. And so for these applications, if you're doing a green card based on these, you don't need to provide an affidavit of support. You do not need to provide a tax return.
So if an application that do not require tax return, can I still provide it to make my case stronger?
That depends. Some applications to immigration can be strengthened by showing favorable discretion documents. These are documents that kind of show the USCIS officer, hey, I'm a good person. Please, give me some status. Let me stay in this country. These favorable discretion documents, they're not strict requirements, but they can help convince a USCIS officer. And like I was saying, these officers are people too. They're looking at applications and they're thinking, oh, this person deserves to stay here. They qualify and they have all these extra things that are good about their background. So these tax returns can help, but don't just submit everything to USCIS because USCIS officers, there are also people who can be suspicious and they might find something wrong with your tax returns. So the best way is to consult with your attorney to see whether these extra documents should even be submitted or not.
Are there any potential problems that going to happen if I submit my tax return?
Whether as a favorable discretion document or as a required document for your affidavit of support or waiver or whatever, a tax return, when you submit it to USCIS, it will be reviewed by the officer. And sometimes there can be problems from that tax return that you have to be aware of and that an experienced attorney will be aware of, right? So if it's required, you have to know, okay, if I submit this, what can be the potential problems, if any? Sometimes there aren't any problems, right? But you have to understand what kind of information is in the tax return. For example, the tax return will show the name, your name, and your spouse's name if you're married. It will show your addresses. So that's relevant for family-based spousal petitions. Do you have the same address? If you don't have the same address, that's going to be suspicious.
Yeah.
Yes, is going to think, oh, are they really married? Same with the tax filing category. With tax returns, you can, if you're married, you can file jointly where you combine your income, or you can file separately even if you're married. And a USCIS officer who sees a tax return saying that they're married but filing separately, they might think, okay, what is going on here? What is the story here? Why are they not combining their tax returns? There might be a valid reason for it, but just know that that's something that USCIS officers are looking at, right? So the tax return also has your dependents. It lists out all your children and the people who are living with you who rely on you for their financial support. And this is relevant, for example, for waivers, because you want to show hardship to your family, to your household. How many people are you supporting, right? And if you don't have any dependents in your tax return and you're claiming hardship to all of these people, all of these children, USCIS is going to think, okay, where are these children? Why are they not in the tax return? So these are things that you have to make sure that the contents of your tax return, number one, are honest and true. And number two, that they're consistent with what you're saying in your immigration applications. Because like I said, USCIS is looking into that.
So how about the income on the tax return? Will USCIS look at it?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The income numbers themselves, USCIS is also going to look at those. For example, they're going to look at the types of income that you have. If you're saying that, for example, your petitioner is trying to support you, right? And your petitioner is saying, yeah, I have enough income. They're going to look at the sources of that income. Is it from employment? Is it from business? Is it from gambling winnings? Is it kind of like stable employment? Is it a stable source of income or not? Then they're also going to look at who is making the income. For example, for married couples, right? They're combining the income, and there's only like one figure for, let's say, adjusted gross income for a couple. But let's say the husband makes all of the money and the wife makes very little money. That might be relevant for a hardship waiver to establish who is the breadwinner, who is financially supporting the family. If it's the one who is about to be removed who's supporting the family, then obviously that can show financial hardship. If it's the reverse, it's harder to establish financial hardship, right? And also, in relation to what I was saying earlier, the supporting documents, the numbers in your W-2 also matter. Who's making money, which employer is paying which spouse, and who supports who. And also the addresses on the W-2s might be relevant. Where is each spouse living, or where is each spouse working? It can be relevant for spousal applications, petitions, in showing that, yeah, we do live together, we have a common address, and if they don't have a common address, that might be a problem.
Yes, those tiny little things on your tax return might cause problems. So you need a good lawyer to review all those documents before submitting.
And I mean, the important thing, like I was saying, is like, as long as you're honest, both to the U.S. government when you file your taxes, to your lawyer about the details of your life, and to immigration and what you put in your forms, you should be fine. A good lawyer will know how to present your case in the best way as long as you're being honest about it.
Yes, and tax returns are very important in many immigration benefits, and you have to understand how the tax and financial document can impact your case. And we have almost 20-year experience. We know how to guide you to deal with those cases and what kind of document needed for your application.
That's right. So it's tax season. Our annual tax returns are due soon. If you have immigration applications, this is about the time that you should be thinking about, okay, do I need to submit this tax return? Is this included or not? If you want specific legal advice about your case, or if you want representation for your case, please feel free to call us and reach us over any of our platforms. But as far as just watching this YouTube show, just understand, as I say at the end of every show, everything that I talked about is legal opinion based on my legal experience. It is not legal advice and not representation, but you can get representation and advice by reaching out to us.
And also, you can continue to follow us on YouTube. We will be back again next week with another show, Friday at 11 a.m. EST and 8 a.m. PST. See you then.
Bye.